Alright, we've got to talk about House of the Dragon Season 2 because I am seeing so much negativity about the season online, and honestly, I think it's kind of wrong. Now, I'm going to TLDR this video by saying that while I didn't love House of the Dragon Season 2, I also didn't hate it by any means. As a matter of fact, I did like it. I liked it a lot. Sure, it didn't have the same momentum that Season 1 did, where in Season 1, there was a lot of stakes with a lot of characters, and we also had characters that we just don't have here, so it made the show feel different. This season was much different than that, so of course things are going to feel different one way or the other. The problem a lot of people have had with this season online to begin with was about how the plot didn't go anywhere, and it was just characters in the same place talking and stuff like that, but nothing was accomplished. I beg to differ, and as a matter of fact, I'm going to present my first bias of this video before I get into the pros and cons of this season, which I'm going to try to stay on camera here, but I have a whole list of, and the reason I've came to the conclusion, realistically speaking, that I liked this season a lot is because my pros significantly outweigh the cons, and just in general, I knew when watching it because I enjoyed it. But that being said, my bias. I'm one of the type of people, I'm one of those guys who likes Better Call Saul a little bit more than Breaking Bad. I prefer it because I like the slow, character-driven storytelling that is Better Call Saul. That's not to say Breaking Bad is bad by any means whatsoever, but I hope that sheds a little bit of light into where my bias comes from as to why I actually liked Season 2 of House of the Dragon a lot. Again, I didn't love it, but I liked that this story had a very strong focus on things I like the most out of storytelling, which is politics, which is character dramas and character arcs. And I think this season of House of the Dragon did a very good job at exposing the characters within in a light that we never got to see in Season 1, because Season 1 was really, if we think about it, it was all about the time jumps. There was so much going on. It was the introduction to the story. It was King Viserys' story. It was young Rhaenyra's story. And Patty Constantine, I should say, and Millie Alcock did a phenomenal job with their characters, respectively, in those stories. So we were broken into that world. We were just dug into that because they were so good, and we also had to introduce this story in general, and that was a cool introduction because the story at large is great. But now we're in the weeds of the politics of that story. Naturally, this season's going to feel different. So that's my whole spiel. I want to get into the pros because, like I mentioned, they significantly outweigh the cons. I mean, realistically, I only have like 7 cons of the show, maybe, whereas I have like 15 pros. So we're going to jump right in with the first one, and it's really the introduction to the show. I love that it introduced us back into Winterfell, where we had Cregan Stark with Jace and Jace. Yeah, is that it? Jace? I almost said Chase and Jace, whatever. We had Cregan Stark and Jace together at the wall, looking out, talking about all sorts of things with the Winterfell music in the background. I know that's a small detail, but again, I'm going through my list of pros. That's a pro. I loved that connective tissue because I know later in the show, Cregan Stark, as well as House Stark, is going to come back in one way, shape, or form. So it's good that we're having them here now, establishing that with characters that are going to really make this story interesting, especially Jace in particular. Now, I have some things for Chase in the cons that we're going to talk about. See, I just said Chase there. I meant Jace. I have some things in the cons for him. We're going to get into that as well. But I know that's a small detail. It's just one of the many pros I have. The next pro I have on my list, and this is a big, big one, is Aegon. Aegon really, I think, quite frankly, stole this show. I think he stole the season. He was my favorite character within it by far, and just seeing him rise, where, in a sense, you could tell he's not like a good guy, obviously. Like, you could see that he's kind of a bit evil, but he's also not. I feel like this show is really heavily pointing us in the direction that we're supposed to be on the Team Black instead of Team Green. But really, like, they're painting them as the villains, but I also do understand them. I think they're wrong. Would I hang out with them at a bar? Probably not. But I don't really think they're evil either. I mean, there's a couple people there that certainly are, but Aegon is a prime example of that. Aegon was just, I think he was a very complex and well-written character. In a lot of ways, I think he takes the cake this season where Viserys was in season 1, if that made any sense. I think Aegon was written very well. Not nearly as well as Viserys, but he kind of was like that character that stole the show this season, for sure. I mean, I don't think that's even up for debate. He did just such a good job, and Tom Carney, who plays him, should really, I think, win an Emmy for this season. I think he was absolutely phenomenal. And it wasn't just that. The first episode was great with him, where we got to see him and how he'd be as a leader. But then the second episode was even better, because after the events of Blood and Cheese and what happened there and how Aegon just cracked, the stuff we got was just absolutely incredible. Specifically, one of those scenes that I'm talking about is Otto and Aegon's scene. The scene with Aegon firing Otto is one of the best scenes in Game of Thrones history for me. It's one of those scenes of a TV show that I'm going to go back to and watch clips of on YouTube forever. Like, no exaggeration. It's one of those episodes, specifically one of those scenes, that is just so powerful, because the two of them are so charged in that scene. Their acting is amazing. And actually, at that, while we're at it, it's going to come back in the cons in a little bit, but Otto was so damn good, even if he was only in, what was it, 2 episodes of this season? Realistically, I know we saw him in episode 8, but overall, the point I'm trying to make is Otto's actor is a phenomenal actor. Tom Carney is a phenomenal actor. Tom Carney, I should say. Phenomenal actor. And the two of them just acted out that scene brilliantly. And it really was one of those moments in the storytelling that was great. Even as far as bringing Sir Criston Cole to be the next hand and what that introduced for the rest of the season, where we hated Sir Criston Cole. But at the end, and this is another pro, at the end, we felt kind of sympathetic for Sir Criston Cole. I know I did, because what he talked about and how the dragons dance over them and the men are just like dust, it's so true, and it also introduces this complexity to Sir Criston Cole that I really liked, that I knew was always there, but this season they really pegged him as this big antagonist and someone you're supposed to hate, and I do hate him, but also I sympathize with him, and I think the show did a good job with that as well. So I just kind of lumped a couple together, especially a couple that are in my pros list, but Tom Carney, phenomenal as Aegon. Otto was great. Sir Criston Cole stepping in as the hand and his arc this season were great. So right there off the bat, we're talking about character development. Aegon, we got to see this guy who was definitely supposed to be more of a villain. We got to see some really humanity sort of aspects to him in this season. Otto, we got to see more with him. We got to see really that he did so much and meant so much, and even though he is kind of pegged as an antagonist as well, he really was a very important character. We got to see that, even if it was short-lived. And Sir Criston Cole, we got even more of an arc with him, and now we're starting to understand the character more. That's 3 of the many characters in this universe, so that just nailed out all 3 of them. The other thing this ties in to the rest of those items is Blood and Cheese. It's actually specifically Blood and Cheese which caused Otto to get fired, if you think about it. Of course, there's the whole son for a son thing that happened in the first episode, and how Daemon, Jesus, ordered the killing of Aemond, but it turned out to be that they killed Aegon's son. Of course, we know all of that, but the overall story I'm trying to paint here is that they had went ahead and executed, Aegon specifically went ahead and executed all of the rat catchers in the city. That's what started the whole thing with Otto, blah, blah, blah. I just went off on a tangent. The overall point I'm trying to make is I liked Blood and Cheese, and I liked what that did for the story. I liked that we started off the season on that front. And also, if this is any indication, the first few episodes were what I think were the highlight of this season so far. A lot of people are pointing to the fact, and I gotta bring this up now, a lot of people are pointing to the fact that we ended season 1 with Rhaenyra looking into the camera menacingly, like all hell was about to break loose. But I also feel like in the first few episodes, they kept that momentum going, but all of this stuff that happened is absolutely necessary. And that's partly why, and I know we're going through the pros, but that's partly why I just don't understand the criticism for this season. I think it really needed to be slower where we're starting to understand these stories, because if you're looking at the books Fire and Blood, if you're looking at that whole story in general, as you guys know, it's written almost like a history book. It's written from first-hand encounters or passed down the lane and whispered down the lane, blah, blah, blah. We don't know what actually happened. Obviously, this is not a true story, but we don't know the actual events that led to the Dance of Dragons because it's told through, like, history books. Here we're getting it. And I think these moments are just necessary, and it also goes down to all the other characters. Offhead, another thing I'm thinking that is a prime example of this is Alan and Adam and their relationship with Corlys. That was just a very interesting thing. In the beginning, I wasn't a big fan of it. I was like, who are these characters? What are they? And the more we got to watch the episodes, the more I was like, oh, this is really interesting. And then when the dragon finally picked Adam at the end of the story to be his rider, it just all clicked, and it was a really awesome story. And now seeing where that's going to go with Alan later and how they're going to march into war, it's just awesome. It's exciting. And it made something that, I guess, at face value when you're first watching, it's like, what the hell am I watching? But then when you see the whole picture, it just adds so much to it. I know there's a lot of debate online that, like, all of this was unnecessary. It could have been a couple of episodes. Here's the thing, we don't have the full picture here, and I think all of the stuff they did in this season was set up for very important things to come that one day I think we're all going to look back on and be like, oh, that was a necessary season, albeit, sure, it sucks, you have to wait 2 years to see what happens, but these things are necessary. Having moments with these characters, and the biggest one we're about to get into, but having these moments with these characters to understand them when you're going into a war storyline, I think it's absolutely necessary, especially when it's a TV show. This isn't the history books. You know what I mean? The biggest thing, and the biggest example of this that I'm getting at, is the haunting of Harrenhal with Daemon. I don't know why I made that so ridiculous, but seriously, that, for me, I'm very mixed on. It's actually just as equally a con. We're going to get into it in a little bit, but I also think nothing exemplifies what I'm talking about better than that, wherein these moments with Daemon, where we're understanding him, where he's at the weirwood tree and he's having all these dreams, but somehow they're real and all of that stuff, which is crazy, and I'm just putting myself back in focus, sorry, but all of that stuff was just absolutely necessary, but the problem with it is they spanned it out over, 8 episodes? We're going to get into that again in the cons, but what I really liked is that we finally got a development of Daemon's character at large. I think it was absolutely necessary, and I also like that it brought in a chance to have Paddy Constantine back on screen, brought in a chance to have Millie Alcock back on screen. Did I say? Yeah, I said that right, Jesus. But we had the opportunities to have them back on screen, and we had to get a little more context with Daemon to begin with, because before we got to have any of this, Daemon was just this kind of ruthless caricature of a person who wanted to be king. That's what we knew about Daemon, and people loved Daemon for that. But all of this that led to the visions we got, albeit the really ridiculous visions of the White Walkers, which was dumb. And did AI create the Walkers? That's a whole other thing. But regardless, I like that we got all of this to eventually lead Daemon in the very last episode of this season down a path where he saw the Song of Ice and Fire, and he saw what happens. He saw that winter is coming, and he decided Rhaenyra needs to be queen. I love that. I love it. But realistically speaking, I'm sure there is going to be an entire YouTube compilation, just like there are other things, of the haunting of Harrenhal. That's what I'm calling it. That, by the way, that is what I'm calling it. I know it's the Weirwood Tree Dreams or blah, 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 whatever. But The Haunting of Harrenhal could literally be a short film in and of itself, because that's how much screen time it took up. That's where the cons come in, because honestly, I thought it was a lot of filler, but it was also necessary filler, because it gave us a really solid and much needed explanation of Daemon as a character, and it was a great segue to bring back characters we loved from season 1. I know that one was a little mixed, because I feel, both ways about it, but it's true that's how I feel. I think it was great for Daemon overall. Let's see what we got. We got Daemon's arc, we already talked about. We got Sir Criston Cole. Alicent and Rhaenyra. This is another one that is a highly contentious point, and I get it. This never happened in the books. I understand that, and I also understand that it is absolutely beyond ridiculous that Rhaenyra went into King's Landing thinking she wouldn't get captured or anything like that. Like, that's poor writing, and I don't think there's any way around that. It's just straight up poor writing. But Emma Darcy and Olivia Cooke just have phenomenal chemistry. Their camaraderie is fantastic, and it reflects well in their characters, because they have this childhood bond. And I understand one of the directors was trying to say that it's kind of like a love story between Rhaenyra and Alicent. I don't agree with that, but I do think it's like a familial bond that they share. And I also understand on a lot of fronts that both of their sons died at the hands of them, so they shouldn't be having these conversations and they should hate each other. I do get that. I do. But I loved their dynamic together, and I loved the scenes we got with them together, where it was the first one where Rhaenyra basically thought Alicent was a dumb bitch for not realizing that that Viserys was talking about the Song of Ice and Fire, or the story in general, and how Aegon the Conqueror was who Viserys was talking about instead of Aegon in general. So I thought that was a great scene, but then more specifically, I thought the second one with Alicent going to Rhaenyra, how that happened, God knows. Regardless, I thought that was an also amazing scene where we kind of got to see Alicent basically acknowledge that she's just been in the wrong, she made mistakes, and she wants it all to get better. And I like Rhaenyra's reply to that and being like, it's too late, you did this, all of that stuff. I thought it was a really nice dynamic, but you could tell they still have this familial bond or something. I just thought it worked very well. It was great to see, and even though it didn't make sense in any way, shape, or form, I still enjoyed it. And that's also a lot of the reason why I liked this season. There wasn't a moment of the season I didn't enjoy. Yes, Season 2, Episode 8 felt like just a regular episode and not a finale. I 100% understand that. I agree with it entirely, but I still loved the episode. I loved Episode 7. I loved Episode 6, blah, blah, blah. The list goes on down to 1. I loved all the episodes, whether they were slow or not, didn't matter. Their exposés into these characters were they really were phenomenal, and Alicent and Rhaenyra's was just a prime example of that. Another thing that I loved, and I already kind of touched on it, we're going to do this one quickly, is Episode 7. I loved that we got to see the dragons picking out the riders, and ultimately we got to see stuff with Ulf and Hugh and all of those people, and how they all found each other and all of that. I thought it was great. I thought it was executed well, and it finally did something that I like in Game of Thrones that we needed more of, realistically, is to show how menacing these dragons are. And I understand 300 years before Game of Thrones, the dragons were a little bit more prevalent than they were in Game of Thrones. But still, just seeing it on screen and seeing where the budget went, it's just amazing. And that's also why I think the season was the way it was. I think there were budgetary constraints because of all the CG they have to do for these goddamn dragons. But it pays off because it's great to see them, and I love every bit of them. Now, don't kill me in the comments, please, because I don't know all the dragons' names. It's already a task in and of itself to memorize all of the regular names, because they all sound the same. The dragons, that's a whole other thing. I know Vhagar, I know Sunfire or whatever. That's about it. I forget all the other ones' names, but whatever. Episode 7 was a phenomenal episode. Obviously, the Battle of Rook's Rest was another phenomenal episode. But yeah, I mean, there's other things that I did really like about this season too, so we're just going to kind of quickly summarize them here. The twin fight between Eric and Arik was great. That was awesome. Aemond, even though I don't really love the character that much, and I kind of think his face looks like a Red Hot Chili Pepper. Okay, that's a joke. That's obviously not a real reason to not like him, but regardless, even though he's not my favorite character, I like what he's doing, and I like the shoes he's filling, and how much of a menace he is, really. And I think his story, obviously, I mean, you know, there's fire and blood, so we know what happens, but I think this story that we got and his character arc this season is going to perfectly set up big events to come in probably season 4 if we're being realistic, but I like that we have the foundation there. And even with that, I like that Helena also had just an awesome arc this season. I liked her character a lot more this season in general. And I also like that she was like astral projecting to Damon what was happening. I don't get that. That's one of those moments almost like the Hodor moment where I was just like what? That was crazy. But the reason I bring up Helena right now is because I love that scene in episode 8 where you have Helena and Aemon talking, and Helena basically says to Aemon, "You're gonna die. This is what's gonna happen." And Aemon is like, "This is treason. Like, I could have you killed for this." And Helena's like, "What does it matter? I'm just a piece in this puzzle. Like, what does it matter?" I love that. I absolutely love that, and I love that I think we're going to go in a direction more for both of those characters to play out these things. Specifically Helena, I'm excited to see where they go. Aemon was cool too. Again, he's not my favorite character, but I think what they had with him was pretty cool. That just about wraps up the pros, and that's a lot of pros. I've spent 20 minutes recording this already, and all we've talked about are the praises of the season. That's a lot. And if I could talk this much about one season of a show, specifically all of these characters, I think it's indicative of a good season. I really do. And if we're looking at the cons that I have on this list, it's really not that much. The biggest of which, to me, was like a couple things like the Haunting of Harrenhal, which we already talked about, Rhaenyra with a couple things she did, and just other small immature shit. If we're being realistic, that's really my cons list. I'm going to run down my actual list that I have just because I think it's going to be the most easy to do. My first one on the list is Rhaenyra, and how she doesn't really do anything except sit around this season and basically just say, "We need to strike while we have the advantage." That was my horrible Rhaenyra impression. What the fuck was that? But regardless, that's really what it felt like, where she's just like, "We need to strike while we have the advantage, while we have the time." That's all she said. Or Corlys was saying to her, "We need to strike." Or Jace was saying to her, "We need to strike." Or, God, someone was saying to her, "We need to strike." That's literally all that happened this season. That's what I feel like. She just stood there and looked menacing into the camera, finding out bad news about the next person who died, or the next big thing that happened in King's Landing, or whatever. And that's a big thing. Quite frankly, I feel like she didn't have much of a character arc this season. She was just kind of in the background while they were doing a lot more with other characters, which in part is good, because I think we need to establish Aegon. I think we need to establish Aemon, Alicent. I think we need to bring these characters into the forefront, especially with the roles they play in the overarching story of Fire and Blood. So, that being said, I'm not against Rhaenyra not doing much, but because you have an entire season, especially after that menacing shot in episode 8 of season 1, like, you need to do something with her. What did we get with her this season? We got her making out with Meleys? Really? Like, and if anything, while I'm at it, because that is a con on my list, that was just so uncalled for. I don't know what that felt, like, what that served in terms of the story. Like, it just felt random. It felt like stupid writing, to be honest with you. I'm not a fan of that. I wasn't a fan of it, and it's not because, like, it's, you know, them getting together. That it's not about that. It's just, it felt so random and so out of the moment that it's like, why is this happening? This doesn't make sense. They should have been having a bond over something very vulnerable that Meleys was talking about, but instead, they hook up, and that went nowhere the rest of the season. That was weird. That was just straight up weird. That's a big one. The next, this is probably the biggest one, but I also lumped it into the pros, so again, a little conflicted, but it's The Haunting of Harrenhal. So this could have been a short film, and that's what I was talking about. And it was interesting the first few times, but it just got boring to watch. It got old really, really quick. Like, and it even includes, even though I said it was a pro, it even includes seeing all of the characters once again. Like, it was great, but it was only great for a little bit. You could have done that in like maybe 2 episodes, but instead you spanned it out every single episode this season. It wasn't fun. And as a matter of fact, every time it cut to the Haunting of Harrenhal, I only got excited when I saw someone come back, like whether it was Patty Constantine or Millie or any of those people. Seeing them come back was cool, but like it got so repetitive. And I love where it went. Like I said, that's why it's in the pros. I love where it went, and I love what it did for Damon's story. But to see it every week when we're watching episodically, it's just like, oh my God. On a binge, I'm sure it's going to be awesome, but in watching it in real time, it was just not enjoyable. It actually reminds me of the last episode of Fun and Games in Better Call Saul. It's the last shot of Gus Fring. It reminds me a lot of that, where they're talking about wine, him and the bartender, and they're just having a normal conversation. When I first watched that scene, I was like, what the fuck is this? This is how we're getting rid of Gus? Like, this is stupid. This is boring. Like, what is this? And then the more time I spent thinking about it, I absolutely loved it. I know for a fact that that's going to be the Haunting of Harrenhal for me. I know that's the case. So I'm not necessarily complaining. I don't think it's the worst thing ever. I think it's my biggest con because they stretched it out too long on an episodic run for 8 episodes. But I love what it did, so I'm very torn. So while it's like my biggest con, it's also a very strong pro because I love Damon. So I'm mixed on that, but I have to put that in the cons too because it really does matter and it affects the pacing of the overall story. Now, another one, this is a small, and again, this is where I told you they get immature. They really do. Rhaenys's death shot. What I mean by that is when, in Battle of Rook's Rest, when Rhaenys dies, she just falls and she's like, I don't know why, but it was just so fucking corny. Like, and it's not the first time there was something with Rhaenys that was corny to me. The other example of this was in episode 8 of season 1, where she came in with her dragon and just like looked at people when Aegon was like knighted as king or whatever it was. That was corny too, but this was another corny one. That's a small one. I know that's ridiculous, and it's a small reason to have on a con. Another con that I have is not seeing Otto Hightower after I think it was the 2nd or 3rd episode, and I know he doesn't serve like this gigantic story going forward. I get that, but he was just so phenomenal, and his actor is so good. But we did see him at the end in prison, so I'm sure that's going to go somewhere. I don't think it was the last time we saw him. The next one I have is Tywin Lannister. Why the hell did we spend all that time with Tywin Lannister in the last episode of the season? I understand you had to have that stuff occur like you did. It makes sense. It's just, why would you do that in your last episode when it went nowhere? Like, I mean, it went somewhere a little bit, but barely. That was just a waste of time. All right, this one is another really immature one, but I have to bring it up because I think it's funny. Jace's fucking smirk the entire season. Jace literally spent the entire season with that angry smirk where he literally just looked like Hansel from Zoolander except with black hair. Like, literally it was that... It just, I don't know why. Really small detail, very childish detail. I could already see you typing in the comments saying, well, you know you're real thin, blah, blah, blah. I already see it coming. It's a small detail. It was just one of those things. He was just angry the whole time. His story didn't really go anywhere. The best of it was him just saying how he's a bastard and acknowledging that. Otherwise, he was just angry the whole season and went really nowhere. It didn't. There wasn't really anything there with him other than his smirk that looked like Hansel from Zoolander. That's it. And then the last thing I have, and this one I actually just don't really enjoy at all in general, and it's Rhaena's story. I just think, personally, her story this season annoyed me. She was supposed to be watching Rhaenyra's kids, but instead she just sat there like the whole time, just like with this just like stupid look on her face of sadness the whole time, just like zooming out like, I want to be something better. Just why did we need all of those scenes every time we cut to Rhaena? I was like, Jesus Christ, change the story. Get off of this. It doesn't make sense to have all of these shots of her just looking like the whole time. It's so stupid. And then when she gets to, I'm sorry, I gotta say it, the actress, I think the actress has been fine this whole season. I don't think she's the problem, but the facial expressions are a little goofy, and when she found the dragon in the last episode, I forget the dragon's name, her face was like, oh, like, oh God, it's cringy to me. I don't know why, and again, it's part childish, but also in general, I just didn't enjoy the story with her to begin with. I didn't think there was much there. Sure, yes, she always wanted more. She didn't want to be just a babysitter. I understand that. I do, but also in the same vein, I just didn't care at all for her story, like at all. It did nothing for me. So yeah, those are my cons. I already talked about the pros, and I spent 20 minutes of this 30-minute video already talking about those pros. I'm going to wrap it up here because I haven't cut once, and I'm trying to not have a lot of edits in this video of me cutting, so I don't know what else I could say other than I really did enjoy this season. I think the thing with it though is I enjoyed these 8 episodes. I didn't enjoy them as a season, if that makes any sense. I think in a lot of ways this and the 8 episodes of season 1 could have been one lump sum season with a couple additions to make the ending a little bit stronger. Episode 8 was not a finale, it just wasn't, but it was a phenomenal episode, and so were the other ones. So look, I understand the criticism. I do get where people are coming from, where they're saying that this season sucked. I understand that, but I fundamentally disagree with it, and I hope I made that point across in this video. I'd love to know what you think about this season down in the comments, and if you made it to the end, you know, put an emoji of a dolphin in the comments. How about that? That'd be cool. If there is an emoji for the dolphins, whatever. Do that if you've made it this far. If you did, that's awesome. Thank you. But I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. Did you love it? Did you hate it? Are you somewhere in the middle? Let's start a healthy conversation down there. And with all that out of the way, thank you again so much for watching this video. And until the next one, I'll talk to you later. Peace out.